The wheel hit another rut, and Clara Jane Rourke gripped the side of the stagecoach harder, her knuckles white beneath torn lace gloves. The wedding dress, once pristine white satin ordered from Chicago, was now streaked with dust and mud, its hem torn where she'd caught it climbing into the coach at dawn. She hadn't meant to take this road, hadn't planned any of this. 3 days ago, she'd been standing in front of a mirror in her father's house in Topeka, watching her mother pin orange blossoms in her hair. "Smile, Clara," her mother had said. "Mr. Whitmore is a respectable man. You'll want for nothing. Want for nothing except freedom." Clara had thought but didn't say. Thomas Whitmore was 43 to her 28, a railroad investor with hands like ham hocks and breath that smelled of cigars and brandy. He'd courted her father more than her, discussing freight contracts over dinner while she sat silent as a porcelain doll. The stagecoach lurched again, and the driver cursed from his perch above. They were somewhere in Wyoming territory now. She'd lost track of exactly where after changing coaches twice. All she knew was that she was heading west, away from Kansas, away from a marriage that felt like being buried alive. She'd left the letter on her pillow. "I cannot marry where there is no affection. Forgive me." Her father would be furious. Thomas would be humiliated. The whole of Topeka society would feast on the scandal for months. Clara Jane Rourke, the runaway bride. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it, except her throat was too dry. The other passengers, a drummer selling patent medicines and an elderly woman heading to California, had stopped trying to make conversation after the first day. They could see what she was, a woman in a wedding dress with no wedding ring, carrying only a small carpet bag and a haunted look in her eyes. "Hold up." The word cracked through the air like a whip. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs as the coach skidded to a halt, horses whinnying in protest. Through the window, she saw them 3 men with bandanas pulled up over their faces, rifles aimed at the driver. Everyone out nice and easy. The drummer was shaking as he climbed down. The elderly woman clutched her reticule to her chest, lips moving in silent prayer. Clara followed, her dress catching on the coach step, tearing further. She stumbled into the dirt road, the Wyoming sun beating down mercilessly. "Well, well," the tallest bandit said, his eyes crinkling with amusement above the bandana. "Looks like we caught ourselves a bride. Where's your groom?" "Sweetheart." Clara lifted her chin, though her legs trembled. "I have no money, nothing of value." "That's so." He gestured with his rifle toward her carpet bag. "Let's have a look." She watched helplessly as they dumped her few possessions onto the ground, a spare dress, undergarments, her mother's Bible, $40 she'd taken from her father's desk. The money disappeared into the bandit's pocket. "Slim pickings," another said. "What about you, old woman?" while they robbed the other passengers. Clara stood frozen, her mind racing. When they were done, the leader turned back to her, head tilted. "That's a mighty fine dress, even with the dirt. Bet it cost a pretty penny." "Please," Clara said quietly. "It's all I have left." He laughed. "Then you best start walking. Bride. Nearest town's that way." He pointed vaguely north. 20 miles, give or take. They took the horses, leaving the stagecoach useless on the side of the road. The driver cursed and spat, saying he'd walk back to the last way station, 10 miles east. The drummer decided to go with him. The elderly woman sat on a rock and wept. Clara looked north, then at her torn dancing slippers, completely unsuitable for walking. 20 miles, in the Wyoming wilderness, in a wedding dress. "I'll come with you," she told the men heading east. The driver shook his head. "Sorry, miss, you're on your own. Can't have an unaccompanied woman traveling with us. Wouldn't be proper." The irony of propriety at a time like this almost made her laugh. She watched them leave, the elderly woman eventually following despite her tears. Then Clara was alone, truly alone. For the first time in her life, the sun was already past its zenith. She had no water, no food, no proper shoes. but she'd rather die walking than go back to Thomas Whitmore. She started north. By sunset, her feet were bloody inside the ruined slippers. She'd long ago torn strips from her petticoat to wrap them, but it helped little. The wedding dress, with its heavy satin and multiple layers, was like wearing an oven in the heat. She'd unpinned her hair, letting it fall loose to protect her neck from the sun, but she could feel the burn on her face and arms. The landscape was beautiful and terrifying, rolling hills covered in sagebrush, distant mountains purple against the sky, and not a single sign of human habitation. Hawks circled overhead, and once she saw what might have been wolves in the distance, though she prayed they were just dogs. When darkness fell, she kept walking by moonlight until she simply couldn't anymore. She found a cluster of rocks that provided some shelter from the wind and curled up against them, pulling the wedding dress tight around her. Every sound made her jump: the rustle of small animals, the distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of wind through sage. She didn't sleep. She lay there thinking of her comfortable bed in Topeka, of the wedding that should have happened by now, of Thomas's rage when he discovered her gone. Was this freedom worth dying for? As another coyote howled, closer this time. She wasn't sure. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky pink and gold. Clara forced herself up. Though every muscle screamed in protest, her throat was parched, her lips cracked. She'd had nothing to drink since the stagecoach stop yesterday morning. But she walked on, one bloody step at a time. The sun climbed higher. Her vision began to blur. The wedding dress, once her prison, now felt like it was made of lead. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. The mountains seemed no closer than they'd been yesterday. When she saw the glint of water ahead, she was sure it was a mirage. But no, there was a small stream cutting through a grove of cottonwoods. She half ran, half fell toward it, dropping to her knees at the bank and cupping the cold water to her cracked lips. It tasted of minerals and mud, but it was the finest thing she'd ever drunk. She sat back, water dripping from her chin onto the ruined bodice of her dress, and laughed, then cried, then laughed again, because what else was there to do? Clara Jane Rourke, who'd been raised to pour tea and play piano, was drinking from a stream like an animal in a torn wedding dress worth more than most people made in a year. The laughter died when she heard hoofbeats. Her heart seized. The bandits! Come back to finish what they'd started. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She could only watch as a rider appeared through the cottonwoods, moving slow and easy, leading a string of horses behind him. Not a bandit, a man alone, dressed in worn leather chaps and a hat pulled low against the sun. He saw her and reined in his mount, sitting still as a statue for a long moment. Clara waited for him to speak, to demand something, to be like every other man she'd known. Instead, he swung down from his horse with economical grace and approached slowly, like she was a spooked animal, which, she supposed, she was. When he got close enough, she could see his face weathered by sun and wind, maybe 35 years, with calm gray eyes that seemed to take in everything and give away nothing. He didn't ask what a woman in a wedding dress was doing alone by a stream in the middle of nowhere. He didn't leer or make assumptions. He simply knelt by the water upstream from her, filled his canteen, and then held it out to her. Slower this time, he said quietly. His voice was low, unused to much talking. Make yourself sick otherwise. She took the canteen with shaking hands and sipped carefully. He moved back to his horse, pulled something from his saddlebag, hardtack and dried meat. He set it on a flat rock between them and returned to checking his horse's hooves, giving her space and dignity she hadn't expected. Clara ate slowly, her stomach cramping from emptiness. The man worked with his horses, occasionally glancing her way but saying nothing. When she'd finished what he'd left, he finally spoke again. "Can you ride?" She nodded, though she'd only ever ridden side saddle in Central Park. Ranch is 3 hours north. You can rest there. He didn't ask if she wanted to come, didn't ask her name or story. just stated facts and let her decide. Clara looked at the empty road stretching in both directions, at her bloody feet, at this strange, quiet man who offered help without strings attached. "Yes," she said simply. He caught one of the gentler mares from his string, a bay with kind eyes, helped her mount without commenting on her awkward climb in the ruined dress. Then he swung back onto his own horse and started north at an easy walk, leading the string with Clara following. She didn't know his name, didn't know where exactly this ranch was or what awaited her there. But as they rode through the sage-scented morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Not safe, she was too wise now to feel truly safe. But for the first time since she'd put on this wedding dress, she felt like she could breathe. The man rode ahead, his back straight despite what must have been long hours in the saddle. Clara followed on the gentle bay mare, trying to find a rhythm with the horse's gait. The wedding dress, never designed for riding astride, bunched and pulled uncomfortably. She had long since stopped caring about modesty. Survival had a way of rearranging priorities. They climbed steadily into the foothills, the landscape changing from sage flats to scattered pines. The horses picked their way along a trail that seemed invisible to Clara, but clear as a road to her silent guide. He checked on her only once, glancing back when she'd fallen too far behind, then slowing his pace without comment. After 2 hours, they crested a ridge, and Clara caught her breath. Below lay a valley cupped between hills like hands holding water. A stream wound through it, silver in the afternoon light, feeding patches of green grass. And there, nestled against the eastern slope, sat a collection of buildings, a log house with a stone chimney, a barn weathered to silver gray, various outbuildings and corrals. It wasn't grand. It wasn't even particularly large, but something about the way it fit into the landscape, like it had grown there naturally, made her throat tight. This was a place carved out by someone's own hands, shaped by work and will rather than inherited wealth. The man, she still didn't know his name, led the way down a switchback trail. As they approached, a dog emerged from the barn, some kind of shepherd mix with intelligent eyes. It barked once, then recognized its master and trotted alongside the horses. They rode into the yard, and Clara saw details she'd missed from above. The vegetable garden with neat rows, the well-maintained fences, firewood stacked precisely against the house. Everything spoke of order, of someone who took care with things, who planned ahead. He dismounted near the barn and moved to help her down. His hands were steady at her waist, lifting her from the saddle as if she weighed nothing. When her feet touched ground, her legs buckled. He caught her elbow, held it just long enough for her to find her balance, then stepped back. "House is there," he said, nodding toward the log structure. "I'll tend the horses." Clara stood swaying slightly, unsure. In her world, there were protocols, introductions, proper ways of being a guest. This man seemed to operate by different rules entirely. I don't even know your name," she said. He paused in loosening the saddle girth. "Bo Holt." "I'm Clara Jane." She hesitated. "Not Whitmore. Never Whitmore." "Rourke." He nodded once, as if storing the information, then returned to his work. Clara made her way to the house on unsteady legs. The door wasn't locked, perhaps nothing out here was. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was Spartan but clean. One main room served as kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the hearth, shelves with dishes and supplies, everything in its place. A ladder led to what must be a loft above. 2 doors led off the main room bedrooms, she assumed. It smelled of wood smoke and coffee and something else, loneliness. Maybe the particular quiet of a place where someone lived alone, spoke little, kept their own counsel. On the mantel sat a single photograph in a tarnished frame, but she was too exhausted to look closely. Clara sank into one of the chairs at the table, her legs finally giving out completely. She put her head down on her arms and might have slept if the door hadn't opened 10 minutes later. Bo entered. Carrying her ruined carpet bag, he must have tied it to one of the horses before they left the stream. He set it down, then moved to the stove with the same economical grace she'd noticed before. Water from a bucket into a kettle, the kettle onto the stove, wood added to the firebox, all without wasted motion or unnecessary noise. "Wash basins in the back room," he said without turning. "Soap and towels there, too." Clara forced herself up, taking the carpet bag with her. The back room was clearly his bedroom narrow bed with a quilt, dresser, washstand. Nothing decorative except another photograph, this one on the dresser. She was too tired to be curious. She poured water into the basin and saw her reflection in the small mirror above it. Barely recognized herself. Her face was sunburned, her hair a tangled mess. The wedding dress was beyond salvation torn, stained, smelling of sweat and fear and desperation. She washed as best she could, then opened her carpet bag. Her spare dress was still there, wrinkled but clean, simple calico, the kind of thing Thomas would have thrown out after the wedding. She'd never been so grateful for plain cotton. Changing was difficult. The wedding dress, with all its buttons and stays, had been designed to require help. She struggled with the fastening and, finally using her teeth to tear through stubborn threads. When the dress finally fell away, she kicked it into a corner with satisfaction. The calico dress felt like freedom itself. When she emerged, Bo had set out food beans and cornbread, simple but hot, a mug of coffee strong enough to float horseshoes. He sat across from her, eating in silence. Clara found the quiet restful rather than awkward. After days of running, of fear, of constant vigilance, the simple act of sharing a meal felt like sanctuary. "I can pay for the food," she said finally. Once I find work somewhere." He looked up from his plate. Those gray eyes studied her for a moment. "No need. I won't be a charity case." "Didn't say you were." He took another bite of cornbread. "Ranch needs work doing. You can work. You can stay." It wasn't a question. Wasn't exactly an offer either. Just a statement of fact, like noting the weather. Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the simple practicality of it. No conditions, no implications. No sense that she'd owe him anything beyond honest labor. "I don't know much about ranching." "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Can you mend?" "Yes." "Can you work hard?" "Yes." He nodded. "That'll do." After supper, he showed her to the other bedroom, smaller than his, but clean, with a bed, a chair, and a small dresser. On the bed lay folded clothes, women's clothes, a simple brown dress, undergarments, an apron, well-made but plain, the kind a ranch woman would wear. "Were my wife's," he said quietly. "Been gone 6 years. Clothes are no use sitting in a trunk." Clara touched the fabric gently. "How did she—" "Winter of '84. Bad storm. Went to check the stock in the far pasture. Didn't come back. Found her 3 days later when the snow cleared. Horse had thrown her." The words were flat, factual, but she heard the grief worn smooth by time underneath them. "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "Long time ago." He moved to the door, then paused. "Name was Mary Elizabeth. You favor her some in size. Clothes should fit near enough." Then he was gone, closing the door softly behind him. Clara sat on the bed, holding the dress of a dead woman, in a house that still carried her ghost. Outside, she heard Bo moving around, the dog's bark, the distant low of cattle. She should have been frightened, should have been planning her next escape. Her journey to California or Oregon or somewhere she could disappear completely. Instead, she felt a strange peace settling over her like dust. This place, with its grief and its silence and its simple honesty, felt more real than anything in her life before. Clara changed into Mary Elizabeth's nightgown. It smelled of lavender and cedar, carefully preserved. She wondered what kind of woman would choose this life. This isolation, this taciturn man. What kind of love had built this quiet house and tended this hard land? Lying in bed, she listened to the night sounds wind in the pines, a coyote's distant call, the creak of the house settling. Somewhere, Thomas Whitmore was raging about his runaway bride. Her father was orchestrating a search. Society matrons were shredding her reputation over tea. But here, in this narrow bed that had belonged to another woman, Clara Jane Rourke felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, not safety, but possibility. The chance that she might become someone new, someone shaped by her own choices rather than others' expectations. She thought of Bo Holt's quiet kindness, his matter-of-fact acceptance, no questions about the wedding dress, no assumptions about her virtue or lack thereof. Just work that needed doing and a place to do it. Tomorrow, she would learn this new life, would discover what Mary Elizabeth had known about keeping house on a ranch, would find out if her soft hands could become capable, if her sheltered existence had left her with any skills worth having. But tonight, she simply existed, a woman in a borrowed nightgown, in a borrowed bed, in a borrowed life. It was more than she'd had this morning by that stream, when she'd been ready to die rather than go back. Through the thin walls, she heard Bo moving in his room, the creak of his bed. Such an intimate sound, sharing a house with a stranger. But there was something honest about it, too. Two damaged people, keeping their distance but sharing space, like horses in adjoining stalls, aware of each other but asking nothing except peace. Clara closed her eyes and, for the first time in 3 days, slept without dreams. Clara woke to unfamiliar sounds, a rooster crowing, the low of cattle, the distant ring of an axe against wood. For a moment, she couldn't place herself. Then it all came rushing back, the flight from Kansas, the robbery, the silent man who'd brought her here. Gray morning light filtered through the small window. She rose, wincing at muscles sore from yesterday's ordeal, and dressed in Mary Elizabeth's brown dress. It fit well enough, though she had to adjust the hem. The fabric was soft from wear, practical in a way her own clothes had never been. In the main room, she found evidence of Bo's early rising, the stove already warm. Coffee made, though the man himself was nowhere to be seen. Through the window, she spotted him by the corral, working with a young horse. The animal shied and danced, but Bo remained patient, his movements slow and deliberate. Clara had expected him to leave instructions, some indication of what he expected from her. Instead, she found only the quiet house waiting. Well, she'd said she could cook. She'd start there. The pantry revealed supplies: flour, lard, salt pork, dried beans, preserved vegetables, basic fare, but adequate. She found eggs in a basket by the door, still warm. By the time Bo returned, she had biscuits in the oven and salt pork frying. He stopped in the doorway, hat in hand, seeming surprised. Then he nodded and went to wash at the basin. They ate in companionable silence, though Clara noticed he ate everything she'd made, even the slightly scorched edges of the biscuits. "Stock needs checking in the east pasture," he said finally. "Be gone most of the day." "All right." He hesitated, unusual for him. "You need anything, fire the rifle by the door. 3 shots. I'll hear it." After he left, Clara explored her new domain properly. The house was well built, chinked tight against winter winds. She found Mary Elizabeth's presence everywhere in the carefully labeled preserve jars, the neat stitching on the quilts, the garden plot already showing green shoots of early vegetables. But she also found neglect. 6 years of a man living alone had left their mark. Dust in corners, windows that hadn't been properly cleaned, mending piled in a basket. The vegetable garden was producing, but weeds competed with the plants. The chicken coop needed fresh straw. Clara rolled up her sleeves and set to work. By noon, she'd cleaned the windows until they sparkled, beaten the dust from the rugs, and started a pot of beans for supper. Her hands, soft from a lifetime of leisure, began to blister from the lye soap and hot water. She wrapped them in strips of cloth and kept working. She found Mary Elizabeth's sewing basket, the needles still sharp, thread organized by color. The mending pile contained shirts, trousers, a torn jacket. Clara settled by the window and began to stitch, finding comfort in the familiar task. This, at least, she knew how to do. As she worked, she tried to picture the woman who'd lived here before. Mary Elizabeth had been loved, that was clear in the way Beau had preserved her things, the careful way he'd spoken her name. But she'd also been capable, strong enough for this life that demanded so much. Clara wondered if she could be that strong. Late afternoon brought the sound of hoofbeats. She looked up to see Beau riding in, moving different than this morning. He dismounted carefully, favoring his left side. When he turned, she saw the tear in his shirt, the dark stain of blood. She met him at the door. "You're hurt. Caught it on wire. It's nothing." But she could see the way he held himself, the tightness around his mouth. "Sit," she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "Let me see." He looked ready to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He sat at the table while Clara fetched water and the medical supplies she'd noticed earlier. The cut ran along his ribs, not deep but long and jagged. "Shirt needs to come off," she said. He unbuttoned it without comment, revealing a torso marked by years of hard work scars from wire and rope, muscles lean and corded. Clara had never seen a man's bare chest outside of Greek statues in museums. But there was nothing improper in this moment, just the practical need to tend a wound. She cleaned the cut carefully, noting how he never flinched despite what must have been considerable pain. When she finished binding it with torn strips of clean cloth, he pulled his shirt back on. "Thank you," he said quietly. "There's stew for supper, and I've started the mending." He looked at the pile of repaired clothing, something shifting in his expression. "You didn't need to—" "I said I'd work. This is work that needs doing." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Suppose it is." They ate supper as the sun set, painting the mountains purple and gold. Clara had found dried herbs in the pantry, adding them to the stew. Beau ate 2 bowls without comment, but she took it as approval. "Tomorrow's Sunday," he said as she cleared the dishes. "Usually ride to town for supplies every other week. This is the week." Town, other people, questions about who she was and why she was here. Clara's hands stilled on the plates. "You don't have to come," he added, reading her hesitation. "Can give you a list to fill." She almost agreed, then stopped. Hiding would only make things worse. "No, I'll come. I need proper work clothes, if I'm to stay." He nodded. "Mary's things are yours to alter as you need, but new boots would be wise. Hers likely won't fit." After dishes, they sat by the fire, him in the big chair, her in the rocker that must have been Mary Elizabeth's. He worked on repairing a bridle while she continued the mending. The silence between them had weight but not discomfort, like a quilt settled over the room. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said eventually. He looked up from the leather in his hands. "Why did you help me? You don't know anything about me. I could be running from something terrible." Beau considered this, his hands still on the bridle. "Way I figure, everyone's running from something. Question is whether they're running to something better or just running. Which am I? Don't know yet. Suppose we'll find out." She returned to her sewing, oddly comforted by his honesty. In her old world, men had promised her everything: security, luxury, propriety. Beau Holt promised nothing except the chance to work and exist. It felt more real than all those golden promises combined. "The wedding dress," she said suddenly. "It's still in your room. I should burn it." "Your choice. But cloth is cloth. Might be we could trade it for supplies." Practical, unsentimental. Yet he'd kept his wife's clothes for 6 years. Clara was beginning to understand that Beau Holt was more complex than his taciturn manner suggested. When the clock chimed 9, She rose. "Good night, Mr. Holt." "Beau," he corrected. "Just Beau." "Good night, Beau." In her room, she was beginning to think of it as hers. Clara found the wedding dress where she'd kicked it. 16 yards of white satin, French lace, pearl buttons, worth more than Beau probably made in a year. She folded it carefully, thinking of his practical words. Cloth was cloth. Perhaps the dress that had been her prison could buy her freedom. She prepared for bed in Mary Elizabeth's nightgown, braiding her hair as she'd done every night since childhood. Through the wall, she heard Beau moving around his own room. Such strange intimacy, this awareness of another person's nightly routines. Before climbing into bed, she looked out the window at the vast darkness punctuated by stars. Somewhere out there, her old life continued without her. Thomas would have found another bride by now, someone more biddable. Her father would have invented some story about her delicate health, a rest cure in Switzerland, perhaps. But here, in this simple room, she was just Clara, a woman who cooked and mended and tended wounds, who worked because work needed doing, who sat by a fire with a silent man and felt more seen than she'd ever felt in a room full of people who supposedly knew her. Tomorrow, they would go to town. She would face curious looks and whispered speculation. But tonight, she was safe in this borrowed room, in this borrowed life that was beginning to feel like something she might actually own. The house settled around her with small creaks and sighs. Through the window came the sound of night birds and the distant howl of coyotes. Clara closed her eyes and listened to the wilderness singing its ancient song. She was part of it now, another creature finding shelter where it could, making peace with the unexpected turns that had brought her here. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make, chores to do, a trip to town to navigate. But for now, she existed in the quiet darkness, no longer a runaway bride, but simply a woman learning to breathe in a place where the air tasted of pine and possibility. The wagon ride to Eagles Hollow took 3 hours over rutted roads. Clara sat beside Beau on the bench seat, acutely aware of every bump that briefly pressed her shoulder against his. She'd worn Mary Elizabeth's good-dressed dark blue wool, modest and respectable, but nothing could disguise the fact that she was a stranger arriving under questionable circumstances. Beau had said little during the journey, his attention on the team of horses. But as they crested the final hill and the town spread below them, he spoke. "People will talk. Nature of small towns." "I know. Won't be pleasant." Clara straightened her spine. "I've survived worse than gossip." He glanced at her then, something like approval in his gray eyes. "Suppose you have." Eagles Hollow wasn't much one main street. Perhaps 24 buildings clustered along it like teeth in a broken smile. The general store dominated one corner, the church another. Between them scattered a blacksmith, a saloon, a boarding house, and various other establishments necessary for frontier life. It was Saturday, which meant the street bustled with ranchers and their families come to town for supplies and society. Wagons lined both sides of the street. Children darted between wheels while their mothers called warnings. Men gathered outside the saloon, sharing news and tobacco. Beau pulled up outside Jameson's general store. Before he could climb down, Clara saw the first heads turn. A woman in a green dress stopped mid-step, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. She grabbed her companion's arm, whispered urgently. Within moments, half the street seemed aware of their arrival. "Steady," Beau murmured, so quiet she almost missed it. He came around to help her down, his hands firm at her waist. Clara kept her eyes forward, chin high, as they entered the store. The bell above the door announced them with terrible cheer. "Mrs." Jameson stood behind the counter, a woman built like a barrel with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her gaze swept Clara from head to toe, taking in the borrowed dress, the work-roughened hands, the absence of a wedding ring. "Mr. Holt," she said coolly. "Haven't seen you in town for a spell." "Mrs." Jameson. Bo touched his hat brim. Need the usual supplies, and Miss Rourke needs some things. Miss Rourke, not Mrs. Anybody. Clara felt the weight of that unmarried title settle on her shoulders like a yoke. Around the store, she sensed other shoppers drawing closer, pretending to examine goods while straining to hear. I need work boots, Clara said, her voice steady, and fabric for everyday dresses, something sturdy. Mrs. Jameson's lips pursed. We don't usually extend credit to newcomers. No credit needed. Bo pulled out his worn leather wallet. Add it to my account. The atmosphere in the store shifted, became electric with speculation. Bo Holt, who'd lived alone since his wife died. Buying women's clothing, the story would be all over town within the hour. Clara selected her items quickly: boots that would hold up to ranch work, plain calico and wool, thread and needles to replace what she'd used from Mary Elizabeth's basket. She was reaching for a bolt of practical brown cloth when she heard the voice behind her. Well, I never thought I'd see the day. Clara turned. A woman her own age stood there, pretty in the hard way of frontier women, with calculating eyes and a smile sharp as glass. Her dress was finer than most, trimmed with real lace. I'm sorry, do we know each other? Margaret Henley. My husband owns the bank. She stepped closer, voice dropping to a stage whisper meant to carry. We're all just dying to know how you came to be at the Holt place. Such a mystery, appearing out of nowhere, though I suppose desperate circumstances make for strange arrangements. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. Mr. Holt was kind enough to offer me employment. I keep house and cook. Oh, is that what they're calling it now? Margaret's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. How modern. That's enough. Margaret. The voice came from behind them. Clara turned to see another woman, older, with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair. She wore a simple dress, but carried herself with quiet authority. Sarah, Margaret's smile faltered. I was just welcoming our visitor. I heard. Sarah Miller, the pastor's wife. Clara would learn later, turned to Clara with genuine warmth. I'm Sarah Miller. Welcome to Eagles Hollow. Miss Rourke, Clara Rourke. Miss Rourke. Sarah's emphasis on the title was deliberate, a gentle rebuke to the gossips. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. The parsonage is always open. Margaret sniffed and flounced away, but the damage was done. Clara could feel the weight of judgment from every corner of the store. She gathered her purchases quickly, eager to escape. At the counter, Mrs. Jameson tallied their goods with pruned lips disapproval. That'll be $12.40. Bo paid without comment, as Mrs. Jameson made change. She couldn't resist adding, You know, Mr. Holt, people do talk. A young woman, living out there with just you. It ain't proper. Good thing I don't live for other people's opinions. Bo's voice was mild, but Clara caught the steel underneath. The supplies. They loaded the wagon in silence. Clara could feel eyes watching from windows and doorways. As Bo helped her up to the seat, a man emerged from the saloon, whiskey heavy on his breath despite the early hour. Well, Bo Holt's got himself a new woman. The man swayed closer, leering up at Clara. Didn't take you long to replace Mary Elizabeth, did it? Though this one's prettier. Hey there, sweetheart. If things don't work out with the hermit, you come find Tom Bassett. I'll show you a real good time. It happened so fast Clara almost missed it. One moment, Bo was checking the wagon's tailgate. The next, Tom Bassett was flat on his back in the street, blood streaming from his nose. Bo stood over him, knuckles already swelling. You'll keep a civil tongue when speaking to Miss Rourke, Bo said quietly. And you'll not speak my wife's name again. Bassett scrambled backward, hand to his bleeding nose. You broke it! You broke my damn nose! The next time it'll be your jaw. Bo climbed up beside Clara and clicked to the horses. They rolled out of town at a steady pace, leaving Bassett cursing in the dust and the whole town buzzing with fresh scandal. They were a mile out before Clara spoke. "You didn't have to do that. Man insults a woman under my protection. There's consequences. People will talk more now. Let them." Clara studied his profile, the set jaw, the muscle ticking in his cheek. "Did you love her very much, Mary Elizabeth?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Loved her enough to marry her, enough to miss her when she's gone, enough to know she'd box my ears for letting town gossips drive away someone who needs help. I'm not trying to replace her." "I know." He glanced at her sideways. "You're not her type anyway. Mary Elizabeth would have hit Bassett herself, not waited for me to do it." Despite everything, Clara found herself smiling. "She sounds formidable. She was taught school before we married. Only woman in 3 counties who could make grown cowboys mind their manners." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You're different, quieter, but strong in your own way. Takes strength to run towards something uncertain instead of staying with what's safe but wrong." They rode in companionable silence after that. Clara thought about Margaret Henley's insinuations, Mrs. Jameson's disapproval, the way even kind Sarah Miller had looked at her with a mixture of pity and concern. She was a fallen woman in their eyes, if not yet. Then, surely soon, living with a man not her husband, no matter how separate they kept themselves. "I could leave," she said suddenly. "Find work in another town. I don't want to ruin your reputation." Beau snorted. "What reputation? I'm the hermit who barely comes to town. Remember, they've been telling stories about me for years. Least now they'll have something interesting to talk about." "I'm serious." He reined in the horses, turning to face her fully. "You want to leave?" Clara thought about it. The hard work, the isolation, the weight of small-town judgment. Then she thought about quiet evenings by the fire, honest labor that left her tired but satisfied, the way Beau treated her like a person instead of a possession. "No," she admitted. "I don't want to leave." "Then don't." He clicked to the horses again. "We'll go to town once a month instead of twice. Less chance for Tom Bassett to run his mouth." "What about supplies?" "I lived 6 years without going to town regular. Can do it again." "You shouldn't have to change your life because of me." He was quiet for a moment. "Maybe change isn't always bad. House smells better with your cooking. Clothes fit better with proper mending. Even the chickens seem happier." It was probably the longest speech she'd heard from him. Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest, unexpected and sweet. Not love, it was far too early and complicated for that, but affection. Certainly, gratitude. And something else, something that felt like the beginning of belonging. As they turned up the track to the ranch, Clara made a decision. Let Eagles Hollow talk. Let them spin their stories and judge her choices. She'd found something here worth more than their good opinion work that mattered. A man who respected her, and the chance to build a life on her own terms. The sun was high overhead when they reached the ranch. Beau helped her down, his hands lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and Clara saw her own determination reflected in his steady gaze. "Thank you," she said, "for everything today." "No need. We're partners now. After a fashion, partners stand by each other." Partners, not employer and employee, not man and fallen woman, partners. Clara liked the sound of that. They unloaded supplies together, working in easy rhythm. Tomorrow there would be more gossip, more speculation. But today, there was work to be done, a house to tend, a life to build one careful day at a time. As she carried fabric into the house, Clara caught sight of herself in the small mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the pampered Kansas belle who'd run away in a wedding dress. This woman had calloused hands and sun-touched skin. This woman had stood up to small-town gossips and hadn't flinched. This woman was becoming someone Clara actually wanted to be. The weeks that followed their trip to town settled into a rhythm. Clara rose before dawn to start the stove and make breakfast. Bo worked the ranch mending fences, tending cattle, breaking horses. She kept the house, tended the garden, and discovered muscles she didn't know existed. Her soft hands grew calloused, her pale skin bronzed from working in the garden. The new work dresses she'd sewn hung looser as ranch life carved away the softness of her pampered past. But with each passing day, she felt stronger, more capable. One morning, she found Bo struggling to repair a harness one-handed while favoring his still-healing ribs. "Here," she said, taking the leather from him. "Show me how." He guided her through the process, how to punch holes in the leather, thread the heavy needle, make stitches strong enough to hold under strain. Her first attempts were clumsy, but she persisted. "You learn quick," he observed. "I had a good teacher." They worked together more often after that. Clara helped with tasks that needed 2 sets of hands holding boards while he nailed, steadying young calves for branding, sorting beans for winter storage. The silence between them grew comfortable, filled with shared purpose rather than awkwardness. One evening, as she served supper, Bo cleared his throat. "Barn roof needs patching before the rains come. Could use help tomorrow if you're willing." Clara had never been on a roof in her life. "I'll help." The next morning found her in borrowed trousers, scandalous by any measure. But skirts and ladder climbing didn't mix. Bo showed her how to lay shingles, overlap them properly, nail without splitting the wood. The height made her dizzy at first, but the view was spectacular. The whole valley spread below, golden in the autumn light. "Beautiful up here," she said during a water break. "Mary Elizabeth loved it. Used to come up just to think sometimes." He paused, then added quietly, "Glad someone else can appreciate it." They worked through the morning, Clara's inexpert but willing assistance making the job go faster. She was reaching for another shingle when her foot slipped. For a terrifying moment, she felt herself falling. Then Bo's strong hand caught her arm, hauling her back to safety. "Steady," he said, but she could hear his heart hammering where her hand pressed against his chest. "You're all right." They stayed frozen for a moment, closer than they'd ever been. Clara could see flecks of gold in his gray eyes, feel the warmth of his breath. Then they both stepped back, returning to work with careful attention to the shingles. That night, Clara found she couldn't stop thinking about that moment on the roof, the solid strength of him, the way his hand had lingered on her arm, even after she was safe. She pushed the thoughts away. She was here to work, to build a new life. Complications would only make things harder. But complications came anyway. A week later, Clara was hanging laundry when she heard riders approaching. 3 men, their horses lathered from hard riding. Her heart sank as she recognized the lead rider, Sheriff Wade McKinnon from town, his star glinting in the sun. Bo emerged from the barn, rifle casual in his hands. "Sheriff." "Bo." McKinnon dismounted, his weathered face serious. "Got a situation? There's a man in town looking for someone. Young woman, brown hair, might have been wearing a wedding dress when she left Kansas." Clara's hand stilled on the wet sheet, through the kitchen window. She watched Bo's face reveal nothing. "That's so." "Claims she's his fiancée. Says she's touched in the head, needs protecting. Got papers from a judge back east saying he's her legal guardian." McKinnon shifted uncomfortably. "Now, I'm not one to get involved in domestic matters, but if she's here, I'm obligated to—" "She's not touched," Bo said flatly. "And she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go." "Bo, be reasonable. If he's got legal papers." "Don't care if he's got papers from President Cleveland himself. Woman works for me. She's under my protection." Clara stepped out of the house, unable to hide any longer. The sheriff's eyes widened slightly at her appearance, the rough dress, the sun-browned skin, the calloused hands. Not quite the delicate flower Thomas had likely described. "Miss Rourke, I presume—" McKinnon touched his hat. "There's a Mr. Thomas Whitmore at the hotel. Says you're promised to him." "I was," Clara said steadily. I broke that promise. I'm a free woman, Sheriff. I choose where I go and who I work for." "He says you're not in your right mind. Says your father signed papers." "My father had no right." Her voice sharpened. "I'm of age and sound mind. If Mr. Whitmore wants to speak to me, he can do it here, with witnesses." McKinnon looked between them, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "I'll relay the message. But ma'am, if he does have legal claim—" "He doesn't," Bo interrupted. "Now, if you're done, we've got work to do." The sheriff left with his deputies, but Clara knew it wasn't over. She sank onto the porch steps, head in her hands. "I should leave. If Thomas has legal papers, he could make trouble for you." Bo sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "You running again?" "I'm trying to protect you. You've been nothing but kind, and I've brought trouble to your door." "My door's seen trouble before." He was quiet for a moment. "What kind of man is he, this Whitmore?" Clara thought about how to explain Thomas his crushing handshakes disguised as affection, his way of talking over her as if she wasn't there, his plans for her life that never included asking what she wanted. "The kind who sees people as possessions," she said finally. "The kind who thinks money and power mean he can take whatever he wants. He hurt you. Not physically, but there are other ways to hurt someone, ways that don't leave marks." Bo's jaw tightened. "He won't take you, not from my land." "You can't fight the law." "Watch me." He stood. Decision made. "I'm riding to town. Got a telegram to send." "To whom?" "Friend in Denver. Judge there who owes me a favor. We'll see how legal those papers really are." He paused at the door. "Bar the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone you don't know." Clara spent the afternoon trying to work, but her hands shook as she kneaded bread. Every sound made her jump. When she heard horses again near sunset, she grabbed the rifle by the door, only relaxing when she recognized Bo's paint mare. He entered carrying a telegram. "My friend will look into it. Meanwhile, we prepare for visitors." He set a box of ammunition on the table. "Can you shoot?" "No." "Time to learn." They spent the evening in the yard, Bo teaching her to hold the rifle properly, sight down the barrel, squeeze rather than jerk the trigger. Clara's first shots went wild, but gradually she found the rhythm of it. "You don't aim to kill unless you have to," he instructed, "but a shot fired over someone's head makes them reconsider their choices." As darkness fell, they sat on the porch cleaning the guns. The familiar ritual seemed to calm him, and Clara found herself calmed by extension. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "You could just let him take me. Save yourself the trouble." Bo looked up from the rifle barrel. "You know what I saw that day by the stream woman who'd rather die free than live caged. Takes a particular kind of strength to choose the unknown over the unbearable." He returned to his cleaning. "Mary Elizabeth had that strength, recognized it in you right off. I'm not her." "No, you're you, and you deserve the chance to stay that way." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. In all her life, no one had ever fought for her right to simply be herself. Her father had seen her as currency, Thomas as property, society as a role to be filled. But this quiet man offered her something priceless, the freedom to choose. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude as always. They sat in companionable silence, cleaning weapons and watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, Clara felt less alone than she had in years. In the house, she paused by the photograph on the mantel, Bo and Mary Elizabeth on their wedding day. The woman looked directly at the camera, chin lifted, eyes fierce with joy. Clara understood why Bo had loved her, why he'd recognized a kindred spirit in a bedraggled runaway by a stream. "I'll try to be worthy of it," she told the photograph quietly. "This chance he's giving me, the trust." Outside, She heard Bo making his final rounds, checking locks, settling the animals, the ordinary sounds of evening on a working ranch. But underneath ran a current of vigilance, of preparation. Tomorrow. Thomas would come. Tomorrow. She'd have to face her past. But tonight she was safe. Tonight she was home. She climbed the ladder to check Bo's work on the barn roof, running her hand over the fresh shingles they'd placed together. In the moonlight, she could see the whole valley spread below this place that had taken her in, challenged her, changed her. Whatever tomorrow brought, she wouldn't run. She'd stand her ground on this land that had taught her strength, beside the man who'd shown her respect. Clara Jane Rourke was done being anyone's property. She was her own woman now, calluses and all, and she'd fight to stay that way. The carriage appeared just after noon, black lacquered wood and brass fittings, as out of place on the dusty ranch road as a peacock in a henhouse. Clara watched from the kitchen window as it rolled to a stop in the yard, her hands steady despite the churning in her stomach. Thomas Whitmore stepped out first, immaculate in a gray suit despite the dust. He looked exactly as she remembered, heavy-jowled, prosperous, with pale eyes that cataloged everything they saw as potential profit or loss. Behind him came two men she didn't recognize, hired muscle from their bearing. Bo emerged from the barn, rifle cradled casual but ready. "Gentlemen, you're on private property." Thomas's eyes found Clara in the window. His smile was triumphant. "There you are, my dear. I've been so worried. Come out now. This foolishness has gone on long enough." Clara stepped onto the porch, chin high. She dressed deliberately in her work clothes, patched dress, sturdy boots, hair in a simple braid. Let him see what she'd become. "Mr. Whitmore," her voice carried clear across the yard. "I have nothing to say to you." "Clara, darling, you're clearly unwell. Living in these conditions." He gestured dismissively at the ranch. "Your father is beside himself. Come home where you belong." "This is my home now." Thomas's face darkened. "Don't be ridiculous. I have papers from Judge Morrison declaring you incompetent, unable to make rational decisions. Your father signed them gladly once he understood your mental state." "My mental state is fine." "Is it running away in your wedding dress, living with a strange man without benefit of marriage? These are not the actions of a sound mind." He pulled papers from his coat. "Sheriff McKinnon has already reviewed these. You'll come with me now, or I'll have you removed by force." Bo stepped forward. "Like to see you try." "Mr. Holt, isn't it?" Thomas barely glanced at him. "I could buy your little ranch 10 times over. Don't insert yourself into family business." "Miss Rourke works for me. That makes her my business." "Works?" Thomas laughed, ugly and knowing. "Is that what you call it? Tell me, Holt, what exactly does she do to earn her keep?" The rifle shifted in Bo's hands. "Careful." Clara moved down the steps, placing herself between them. "I cook, I clean, I mend, I tend the garden and help with the stock. I earn my wages honest, which is more than you've ever done." "You forget yourself." Thomas's voice dropped, the genial mask slipping. "You're mine. Clara. Bought and paid for. Your father took my money for the wedding, signed the contracts. You don't get to simply change your mind." "I'm not property to be bought." "Aren't you? Your father thought different. Sold you neat as any heifer at market." His smile was cruel now. "Did you really think you could run? I have friends in every territory. Judges, lawmen, politicians. One word from me and you're Mr. Holt loses his land for harboring a fugitive." "She's no fugitive," Bo said quietly. "She's a free woman who made a choice." "Free?" Thomas laughed again. "There's no such thing as a free woman. They're daughters until they're wives, property of their fathers, then their husbands. It's the natural order." "Your natural order," Clara said. "Not mine." Thomas's hired men shifted restlessly. The tension stretched tight as fence wire. Then hoofbeats sounded on the road. Sheriff McKinnon with deputies, but also another rider. Clara recognized him from town, Edward Hartley, an attorney who sometimes rode circuit. "Afternoon. All," McKinnon said carefully. "Mr. Hartley here has something from Denver might interest you. Whitmore." The attorney, young but confident, dismounted with a leather portfolio. "Mr. Whitmore, I've been retained by Judge Francis Holbrook of Denver to review your documentation. I'm afraid there are some irregularities." Thomas's face flushed. "What irregularities?" "Well, for starters, Judge Morrison of Kansas has no jurisdiction in Wyoming territory. Additionally, the competency hearing you reference it requires the subject to be present and examined by a physician. No such examination took place. Her father has no legal authority over an unmarried woman of 28 years. Hartley pulled out his own papers. "Furthermore, Judge Holbrook was quite interested to learn about certain business dealings between yourself and Judge Morrison. Something about railroad contracts and bribes." The color drained from Thomas's face. "You can't prove anything." "Perhaps not, but Judge Holbrook suggests you return to Kansas immediately. He'd hate for the federal marshals to become involved." Thomas turned to Clara, desperation replacing arrogance. "You stupid girl. Do you know what you've cost me? The embarrassment, the business connections lost." "I know what I've gained," Clara replied. "My freedom." "Freedom." He spat the word. "You'll die out here. Mark my words. When winter comes and you're starving, when this man tires of you and casts you out, remember you could have had comfort, security, everything a woman should want." "Everything you think a woman should want," Clara corrected. "But you never asked me what I wanted. Did you never once?" "I offered you. You offered my father a business deal. I was just part of the merchandise." She stepped closer, no longer afraid of him. "Go home. Thomas, find another girl to buy. But know this, there are more of us who won't be sold than you think. And someday, that natural order you're so fond of is going to change." Thomas's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, violence flickered in his pale eyes. Bo shifted the rifle meaningfully. The moment passed. "This isn't over," Thomas said finally. "I'll ruin you both. I have influence." "Not here you don't," Sheriff McKinnon interrupted. "Mr. Hartley's made things real clear. Miss Rourke's a free citizen of Wyoming territory. You got no claim on her. Now I suggest you get in that fancy carriage and head back to Kansas before Judge Holbrook changes his mind about those federal marshals." Thomas looked around the yard at Clara in her work clothes, at Bo steady and immovable, at the sheriff and attorney united against him. His empire of money and influence meant nothing here. He climbed back into the carriage without another word, his hired men following. They watched until the dust settled and the carriage disappeared over the rise. Then Clara's knees gave out. She sat hard on the porch steps, shaking with delayed reaction. "It's done," she whispered. "It's really done." Bo sat beside her, still cradling the rifle. "You all right?" I was so sure he'd take me. That money always wins." "Sometimes it does," Sheriff McKinnon said. "But you got lucky. Hartley here's been looking to make a name for himself. And Judge Holbrook genuinely hates corruption. Plus," he glanced at Bo, "helps to have friends who know which wires to pull." Clara looked at Bo in surprise. He shrugged, uncomfortable. "Holbrook's an honest judge. Helped me keep the ranch when some bigger outfits tried to squeeze me out after Mary Elizabeth died. Figured he'd be interested in a corrupt Kansas judge." "You barely know me," Clara said softly. "Why go to such trouble?" "Know enough." He stood, suddenly all business. "Sheriff Hartley, appreciate your help. Can offer coffee if you'd like." They declined, eager to get back to town with this story. After they left, Clara and Bo sat in silence on the porch. The afternoon sun slanted across the yard where Thomas's carriage had stood. Already it felt like a bad dream fading. "Thank you," Clara said finally. "For everything, I'll work twice as hard to repay—" "No debt," Bo interrupted. "You don't owe me anything. Just keep being who you are." "And who's that?" He considered. "Woman who makes the best biscuits in Wyoming, who learned to patch a roof without complaining, who stood up to a bully and didn't flinch." He paused. "Who's made this place feel less empty?" Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest. Not just gratitude now, but something deeper, more dangerous to the careful balance they'd maintained. "Bo." "Better get supper started," he said quickly, standing. "All this excitement's made me hungry." She watched him retreat to the barn, understanding his withdrawal. They'd built something good here, something that worked. Adding feelings would complicate everything. But as she started supper, Clara couldn't stop thinking about how he'd looked facing down Thomas, protective, immovable, willing to risk everything for her right to choose. She thought about quiet evenings by the fire, shared work and comfortable silence, the way he saw her as a person complete unto herself. Through the window, she watched him working with the horses, patient and gentle despite his strength. This was a man who understood that power didn't mean dominion, that strength could protect rather than possess. Thomas had offered her security, status, wealth. Bo offered her respect, partnership, the freedom to be herself. It wasn't even a choice. That night at supper, the silence between them felt different, charged with possibility, with words unsaid. When their hands brushed passing the salt, neither pulled away quite as quickly as before. "Storm coming," Bo observed, looking out at clouds building over the mountains. "Can smell it on the wind." "I'm not afraid of storms anymore," Clara said. "I've weathered worse." He smiled then, rare and genuine. "Yes, you have." Later, as she prepared for bed, Clara found herself humming something she hadn't done since childhood. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. But inside, she was warm and safe and free. Tomorrow there would be work. There was always work on a ranch. But tonight, she could simply exist as Clara Jane Rourke, beholden to no one. Choosing her own path one day at a time, the storm that had driven her here was over. Now she could focus on building something new in its wake. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't be building it alone. The first snow came early that year, October barely done when the sky turned pewter and began dropping thick flakes. Clara woke to a world transformed, white silence blanketing everything. Familiar landmarks made strange and beautiful. She found Bo already up, stoking the fire higher than usual. "Need to check the stock," he said. "Storm's going to get worse before it better." "I'll help." He looked ready to argue, then nodded. "Dress warm, layer everything you've got." Clara pulled on wool stockings, 2 petticoats, her heaviest dress, and Mary Elizabeth's old coat. Still, the cold bit deep when they stepped outside. The wind drove snow horizontal, stinging exposed skin like needles. They worked their way to the barn first, ensuring the horses had feed and unfrozen water, then to the cattle shed, where the small herd huddled together for warmth. Bo broke ice from the water troughs, while Clara distributed hay. "2 missing," he said, scanning the herd. "The yearling heifer's red tag and her sister." Clara knew those 2, always wandering farther than the rest. Where would they go? North pasture, maybe. Sometimes shelter in the trees there. He frowned at the darkening sky. "Need to find them before this gets worse." "I'll come with you." "No, too dangerous if the storm—" "You'll need help if they're stuck or injured." She met his protest with steady determination. "I'm coming." They saddled 2 horses, Bo choosing the most sure-footed mounts. He tied a rope between their saddles. "Stay close. If you can't see me, follow the rope." The ride into the north pasture felt like entering another world. Snow fell so thick Clara could barely see her horse's ears. The wind screamed across the open ground, pushing them sideways. She tucked her chin into her collar and trusted Beau's sense of direction. He'd been right about the trees. They found the heifers huddled in a grove of pines, frightened but unharmed. The challenge was getting them to move. Young and skittish, they balked at leaving their shelter. "Have to rope them," Beau shouted over the wind. "Hold them steady while I get the lead on." Clara had watched him rope countless times, but never tried it herself in conditions like these. Her hands were already numb inside her gloves. But she managed to keep the first heifer calm while Beau secured a lead rope, then repeated the process with the second. Leading the reluctant animals back was slow work. The storm had worsened, visibility down to mere feet. Clara's horse stumbled once, nearly going to its knees. She clung to the saddle, heart hammering. Then Red Tag balked completely, planting her feet and refusing to move. The more Beau pulled, the more stubborn she became. They were losing precious time, the cold seeping deeper with each moment. "Let me try," Clara said. She dismounted, approaching the frightened heifer slowly. Instead of pulling, she stood beside the animal, one hand on its neck, speaking low and steady. Nonsense words, really about warm barns and sweet hay and spring grass coming. Gradually, the heifer's trembling eased. "That's it," Clara murmured. "Just a little farther. We're going somewhere safe." When she started walking, Red Tag followed, step by careful step through the blinding snow. Clara led while Beau brought the sister. She couldn't feel her feet anymore, couldn't see more than shadows, but she kept moving, kept talking to the frightened animal. The barn loomed out of the white suddenly. Blessed shelter. They got the heifers inside, and Beau immediately began rubbing them down, checking for frostbite. Clara tried to help but found her hands wouldn't work properly. "Inside," Beau ordered. "Now." She made it to the house, fingers too numb to work the door latch. Beau was right behind her, half carrying her to the fire. He pulled off her gloves, hissing at what he saw. "Too cold too long," he muttered. He filled a basin with cool water, not warm. She'd learned that would damage tissue and plunged her hands in. Pain shot up her arms as feeling returned. "The heifers are fine. You saved them with that patient talk." He knelt beside her chair, gently massaging her hands in the water. "But you pushed too hard. Should have made you stay here." "You needed help." "Not at the cost of your fingers." His own hands were gentle but insistent, working, feeling back into each digit. "Can you move them?" Clara flexed carefully. Everything worked, though it hurt tremendously. "Yes." "Good." But he didn't release her hands, continuing the careful massage. "That was brave. What you did, foolish, but brave. Learned from the best." That earned her a slight smile. Mary Elizabeth used to say I couldn't tell the difference between brave and stupid. "Smart woman." "Yes." His hand stilled on hers. "She would have liked you." They sat that way, her hands in his, while the storm raged outside. The kitchen was warm, lamplit against the early dark. Clara became aware of every point of contact, his calloused palms, the careful pressure of his fingers, the way he cradled her hands like something precious. "Beau," she said softly. He looked up, and she saw her own awareness reflected in his eyes. The careful distance they'd maintained for months suddenly felt paper-thin. He leaned forward slightly. She mirrored him, and for a moment, a log shifted in the fire, sending up sparks. They both startled, the moment broken. Beau released her hands, stood abruptly. "Should check the stock again. Storm's not done." He was gone before Clara could respond, leaving her by the fire with tingling hands and confused heart. She pressed her palms to her cheeks, feeling the heat there that had nothing to do with frostbite. The storm lasted 2 days. They fell into a pattern, checking animals together, sharing meals, sitting by the fire in the evening. But something had shifted. Every accidental touch sparked awareness. Every shared glance held weight. The comfortable partnership they'd built felt suddenly fragile, balanced on the edge of something more. The second night, Clara found Beau standing at the window, watching snow fall in the lamplight. "Can't sleep either," she asked, checking the weather, but he didn't turn from the window. "Should clear by morning." She joined him, careful to leave space between them. "It's beautiful. Dangerous, but beautiful. Most dangerous things are." Clara knew they weren't talking about snow anymore. "Are you afraid?" "Of the storm. Of change." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, Mary Elizabeth and I were friends first. Worked her family's ranch 2 summers before I courted her. Knew each other's minds before we knew anything else." He touched the window glass where frost patterned. "When she died, I thought that part of me died too. The part that could feel that. But it didn't die." "No." He turned to her then, his face half in shadow. "These months, watching you become who you were meant to be, building something together. I tried not to see it, tried not to feel it, but you make that impossible." Clara's breath caught. "I don't want to be a shadow of her, a replacement." You're nothing like her except in the ways that matter: strength, kindness, courage. You're Clara, and that's..." He stopped, struggled for words. "That's becoming everything." The wind howled outside, driving snow against the windows. Inside, the house was warm and still, holding its breath. "I'm scared too," Clara admitted. "Not of you, never of you, but of ruining what we have, of wanting too much." "What do you want?" The question hung between them, simple and terrifying. Clara thought of all the careful months, the slow building of trust and partnership, the way her heart lifted when she heard his horse in the yard, the quiet contentment of shared evenings, the moment in the barn when he'd held her frozen hands like they mattered more than anything. "You," she said simply. "I want you, but only if you want me too, only if it's real and not just loneliness or proximity or..." He kissed her, careful at first, a question more than statement. When she responded, pressing closer, his arms came around her, solid and sure. Clara had been kissed before Thomas's possessive claims, boys back home who saw her as a prize. This was different. This was coming home. When they parted, she was trembling. "Beau!" I know we need to be careful. Take things slow. But Clara, these months with you've brought this place back to life. Brought me back to life." She touched his face, felt the roughness of stubble, the warmth of skin. "You saved me first, gave me a chance when no one else would." "We saved each other, then..." They stood holding each other while the storm spent its fury outside. No promises made beyond the moment. No rush toward what came next. Just 2 people who'd found each other across loss and distance, choosing to stop running from the possibility of more. When Clara finally went to bed, she paused at her door. "Beau, that night when I first came here, you said everyone's running from something. What were you running from?" He considered, feeling easier to be stoned than risk breaking again. "And now I think maybe breaking's how the light gets in." Clara smiled, understanding perfectly. Tomorrow they'd face the world after the storm, figure out what this new thing between them meant. But tonight, with snow falling soft as promises and the house warm around them, it was enough to know they'd chosen to stop running. Together, they'd stand still and see what grew. The snow melted into November mud, and with the roads passable again, Eagles Hollow remembered Clara existed. The first sign came when Reverend Miller arrived unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, his horse picking careful steps through the puddles in the yard. Clara saw him through the window while kneading bread, her hands stilled on the dough. Since the night of the storm, she and Beau had found a new rhythm, still careful, still slow, but warm with promise. Now the outside world came knocking. Beau emerged from the barn as the Reverend dismounted, Reverend. Mr. Holt. The older man's face was serious beneath his wide-brimmed hat. I wondered if I might have a word with both of you. They gathered in the kitchen, Clara serving coffee with hands that wanted to tremble. Reverend Miller was a good man. She'd heard, fair-minded like his wife Sarah, but she knew why he'd come. "I'll be direct," he began. "The town council met last night. There's concern about the situation here." "What situation would that be?" Beau's voice was mild, but Clara heard the steel underneath. "You know what I mean. Miss Rourke living here, unmarried, working for you." The Reverend looked genuinely pained. "I don't judge what arrangements people make, but others do, loudly." "Let them talk," Beau said. "It's gone beyond talk." Reverend Miller pulled out a folded paper. "This is a formal censure from the town council. They're threatening to revoke your grazing rights on the communal land if the moral issue isn't resolved." Clara's stomach dropped. Beau leased additional grazing land from the town without it. The ranch couldn't support the full herd. They'd have to sell off cattle at a loss, maybe lose the ranch entirely. "They can't do that," she said. "We've done nothing wrong." "Legally, they can," the Reverend admitted. "The lease includes a morality clause, antiquated, but binding." He set down his coffee cup. "However, there is a simple solution." Beau's jaw tightened. "Marriage. It would solve everything, make the arrangement respectable. The council would have no grounds for complaint." "Marriage to save grazing rights," Clara said bitterly. "How romantic." "I know how it sounds." The Reverend leaned forward earnestly. "But consider you've been here months now. Clearly the arrangement works. Would making it official be so terrible?" Clara thought of Thomas, of being bartered like cattle. The familiar trap closing again, marriage not for love but for propriety, for other people's comfort. She stood abruptly. "Excuse me." She made it to the porch before the tears came. Behind her, she heard Beau's low voice, the Reverend's replies. The vast landscape that had meant freedom now felt like another cage. "Clara." She hadn't heard Beau follow her out. He stood beside her, not touching, just present. "I won't do it," she said. "I won't be forced into marriage again. Not even—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Not even for you." "I know. We'll lose the ranch. Maybe." She turned to face him, tears still wet on her cheeks. "You'd lose everything rather than force my hand. Clara." His voice was gentle. "What would I be protecting if I became another man trying to own you? That's not what this is, not what we are." The Reverend appeared in the doorway. "I apologize if I've upset you. Miss Rourke, that wasn't my intent." "Your intent was to save us through matrimony," Clara said. "But I've had enough of being saved. Reverend, I'd rather face ruin as myself than prosperity as property." "I understand." He looked between them, something shifting in his expression. "There might be another way. The censure specifically addresses Miss Rourke living here. If she maintained separate lodgings, appeared to live elsewhere." "The old Harper cabin," Beau said slowly. "It's on my property, quarter-mile from here." The Reverend nodded. "If Miss Rourke officially resided there, came here only for work during proper hours, it might satisfy the busybodies." "A polite fiction," Clara said. "Sometimes fiction serves better than truth," the Reverend admitted. "I'll need to see the cabins habitable. Of course. Make a report to the council." After he left, Clara and Beau rode out to inspect the Harper cabin. It sat in a grove of cottonwoods, small but solid. The previous homesteaders had built well before moving on. "Needs work," Beau observed, testing the door hinges. "Roof's sound, though." They spent the next days making it livable, patching cracks, installing a new stove, carrying furniture from the main house. Clara tried not to think about the irony of it, preparing a home she'd never truly inhabit. The night before the Reverend's return inspection, They stood in the fixed-up cabin. It looked comfortable enough, bed with quilts, table and chairs, shelves stocked with supplies, a stage set for propriety. "You could actually stay here," Bo said quietly. "If you wanted, if things between us, if you need distance." Clara turned from the window. "Is that what you want?" "No." The word came quick and certain. "But what I want matters less than what you need." "What I need is to stop running," Clara said. "From the past, from the future, from my own heart." She crossed to him, took his hands. "I won't marry you for the town council, but Bo, I would marry you for us, when we're ready, if we decide that's what we want." His hands tightened on hers. "Clara, I'll keep my official residence here, satisfy their propriety, but my home is where you are. That's my choice, freely made." He kissed her then, sweet and fierce. When they parted, both were breathless. "Someday," he said, "when it's right, I'll ask properly. And I'll answer honestly." The next morning, Reverend Miller inspected the Harper cabin with theatrical thoroughness. "Yes, this will do nicely. Miss Rourke, I trust you'll find it comfortable." "Quite comfortable," Clara agreed, not mentioning she'd already spent the night in Bo's arms at the main house. The Reverend's eyes twinkled. "I'll report to the council that propriety has been restored, though I suggest you maintain the appearance of coming and going, for form's sake." And so they built their polite fiction. Clara kept close at the cabin, lit the lamp some evenings, made sure to be seen traveling between properties at respectable hours. The town gossips gradually found new scandals to chase. But in truth, little changed. She still woke beside Bo most mornings, still shared his bed and board and life. Only now they did it as conscious choice rather than mere circumstance. One evening, as Clara made a show of leaving for home, Bo caught her hand. "This pretense, does it bother you?" "Less than the alternative," she smiled. "Besides, there's something romantic about it, secret lover-stealing moments." "Nothing stolen," he corrected. "Everything freely given." That became their truth, not the fiction for the town, but the reality they built together. Love grown from respect. Partnership deepened into intimacy. They took their time, learning each other's hearts as thoroughly as they'd learned each other's habits. The Harper cabin became useful in unexpected ways. A retreat when they needed space. A place for Clara to practice the independence she'd fought so hard to claim. Some nights she did sleep there, just to remember she could, to wake alone and choose again. Not to be. Winter deepened around them, but the house stayed warm. The town council, satisfied with their fiction, renewed Bo's grazing lease. The ranch prospered, and with it, the quiet life they'd built. Clara thought sometimes of the woman who'd fled Kansas in a wedding dress. That desperate girl seemed like a stranger now. In her place stood someone stronger, calmer, shaped by honest work and chosen love. "No regrets?" Bo asked one night as they watched snow fall from the warmth of their bed. "None," Clara said, meaning it. "You?" "Just one." At her alarmed look, he smiled. "That it took so long to find you?" Outside, winter howled its ancient song. Inside, they held each other close. Two people who'd learned that freedom wasn't about running. It was about choosing where to stand still. The Harper cabin sat empty that night, lamp dark, its purpose served. The fiction had become a different truth that love needed no outside validation, that partnership could exist on its own terms. The town could believe whatever made them comfortable. Clara and Bo knew what was real. The old wooden box sat on the kitchen table like an accusation. Clara had found it while cleaning the root cellar, tucked behind preserving jars that hadn't been moved in years. Dust-covered and bound with twine. It clearly hadn't been meant for discovery. She was still staring at it when Bo came in for the midday meal, stopping short when he saw what lay before her. "I wasn't prying," Clara said quickly. "It was behind the pickled beets. I thought it might be supplies Mary Elizabeth put away." Beau's face had gone carefully blank, the expression he wore when feelings cut too deep for words. He approached the table slowly, running one finger through the dust on the lid. "Her letters," he said finally. "The ones I wrote but never sent." Clara rose, uncertain. "I'll leave you." "No." He caught her hand. "Stay. Maybe it's time." They sat together as he untied the twine with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside lay dozens of letters, some sealed, others just folded. The paper had yellowed with age, but the ink remained clear. Beau picked up the top letter, dated 2 months after Mary Elizabeth's death. "Started writing to her that first winter," he said quietly. "Couldn't stop. Seemed like if I kept writing, she might somehow answer." "You don't have to share them." "I know." He unfolded the letter, scanning his own words from 6 years past. "But you should know who I was, who I still am, partly." He began to read, his voice rough. "Mary, the snow came again last night. I fixed the fence in the north pasture like you asked, though I know you're not here to see it. The house echoes wrong without you. I burned the biscuits again. You'd laugh." His voice trailed off. Clara squeezed his hand, saying nothing. They spent the afternoon that way, Beau reading fragments of grief and memory. Letters about the ranch, about his struggles to maintain what they'd built together. Anger at her for leaving. Guilt for the anger. The slow acceptance that came with seasons passing. "This one's from year 3, he said, unfolding another. "Mary, a woman came by today selling remedies. She had your way of laughing. I almost asked her to stay for coffee, then remembered why I couldn't. I'm forgetting the sound of your voice. That seems like the worst betrayal." Clara wiped her eyes, moved beyond words by the raw honesty of his grief. This taciturn man who spoke so little had poured his heart onto paper for years, creating a one-sided conversation with the dead. Near the bottom of the box, the letters changed, less frequent, less desperate. The final one was dated just over a year ago. "Mary, I think this is goodbye. Not to loving you that's woven too deep to unravel, but to waiting for you to answer. The ranch is thriving. I kept my promise about that. I hope wherever you are, I hope you're at peace. I hope someday I can be too." Beau folded the letter carefully, returned it to the box. They sat in silence as afternoon shadows lengthened across the floor. "I'm glad you found them," he said finally. "Been carrying that box inside me so long, forgot its weight until now. You loved her completely." "Yes, different from how I love you, but not less." He met her eyes. "Does that bother you?" Clara considered. "No, that love made you who you are. The man who knows how to cherish someone, who understands that love isn't possession but partnership." She touched the box gently. "I'm honored you shared this with me." That night, she found her own box, the carpet bag she'd arrived with, still holding her wedding dress. She brought it to the kitchen where Beau was mending harness leather by lamplight. "Since we're sharing past lives," she said, pulling out the dress. It looked absurd now, all that white satin and lace, stained and torn from her flight. She spread it on the table, smoothing the ruined fabric. "The morning of my wedding, my mother laced me into this like armor, 20 tiny buttons up the back. I couldn't breathe properly." Clara traced a torn seam. "I stood in front of the mirror thinking I looked like a ghost, like I was already dead and just hadn't realized it yet." "What made you run?" "Thomas came to see me before the ceremony, to make sure I understood my duties." Her voice went flat. "He explained exactly what he expected. Obedience, silence, sons, in that order. When he left, I looked at myself again and thought if I walk down that aisle, Clara Jane Rourke dies. Someone else will wear my face, speak with my voice, but I'll be gone." Beau set aside his work, listening with complete attention. "So I ran, made it to the carriage house, told the driver my father needed him urgently inside, while he was gone. I climbed onto the wagon and left. No plan, no destination, just away. She managed a small smile, rather dramatic in hindsight. Brave, Bo corrected. Most people wouldn't have had the courage. Or the foolishness. Same thing sometimes. Clara fingered the pearl buttons, remembering her mother's pride in them. I should have burned this months ago. Why didn't you? She thought about it. Evidence, maybe proof that I was someone else once, that I chose to become who I am now. Then keep it. Bo suggested, box it up like my letters, part of the past, but past nonetheless. Instead, Clara lifted the dress, walked to the stove, and opened the firebox. No, your letters were love. This was fear. I don't need to hold on to fear anymore. She fed the dress to the flames piece by piece, first the torn train, then the bodice with its tiny buttons. Finally, the veil she'd found crushed at the bottom of the bag. The satin burned bright, years of someone else's expectations turning to smoke and ash. When it was done, she dusted her hands. There! Clara, the runaway bride, is officially dead. And Clara, the rancher's partner, very much alive. They returned to their evening work, but the air felt clearer somehow. 2 boxes opened, 2 pasts acknowledged and released. Bo's letters went back in their box, but moved to the shelf with the photo albums, honored but no longer hidden. Clara's wedding dress was gone forever, its ashes scattered with the morning cleaning. Later, preparing for bed, Clara found Bo standing by the window in his room, looking out at the winter moon. You all right? Keep thinking about those letters, all those words I never said when she was alive. He turned to her. I don't want to make that mistake again. What do you mean? He took her hands, his face serious in the moonlight. I love you, Clara, not as replacement or second choice or settling. I love you, the woman who works beside me, who stands up to bullies, who makes this place home again. I should tell you that every day, not save it for letters you'll never read. Clara's throat tightened. Bo! You don't have to say it back. I know you're still... I love you too. The words came easy as breathing. Have for months, probably. Was just too scared to admit it, scared of losing myself again. You won't. I won't let you. He pulled her close. We'll keep being who we are, just together, partners first and always. They stood wrapped in each other as the moon traced its path across the sky. In the morning, there would be chores, the pretense of separate residences to maintain, the ongoing dance of a love that didn't fit the town's narrow definitions. But tonight they'd opened old wounds and found them healed, shared secret griefs and discovered they only multiplied the joy. Clara thought of Thomas's rigid expectations, of the woman she'd almost become. Both thought of silent winters and letters never sent. Both were grateful for the winding paths that had brought them here, to this moment, to each other. The past had shaped them but didn't own them. They were free to write their own future, one honest word at a time. No more letters to ghosts. Bo murmured against her hair. Everything I need to say, I'll say to the living. Good, Clara whispered back. I'm here to listen. Outside, coyotes called across the frozen valley. Inside, 2 people who'd learned to speak their hearts held each other close, no longer haunted by who they'd been or lost, only grateful for who they'd found. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it transformed the valley overnight. Snow melted into rushing streams, bare earth erupted with green, and the air filled with birdsong. Clara stood on the porch at dawn, breathing in the sweet air, when she spotted the riders approaching. Not riders, a wagon. As it drew closer, she recognized Sarah Miller on the seat beside her husband. Unusual for the Reverend's wife to make the journey out here. Morning, Clara, Sarah called as they pulled up. Beautiful day, isn't it? Indeed. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. Bo's in the barn. Shall I fetch him? Actually, we came to see you. Sarah climbed down, producing a letter from her pocket. This arrived at the post office, from Kansas. Clara's stomach tightened as she took the envelope. Her father's handwriting stared back at her formal, precise, exactly as she remembered. She hadn't heard from her family since fleeing nearly a year ago. "Thank you," she managed. Sarah touched her arm gently. "If you need anything." After they left, Clara sat at the kitchen table, the letter unopened before her. Bo found her there an hour later, still staring at it. "Bad news." "I don't know. Haven't opened it." She looked up at him. "It's from my father." Bo poured himself coffee, sat across from her. "Want me to read it first?" "No, I need to do this." She broke the seal with trembling fingers. The letter was brief, written in her father's economical style. "Clara Jane, your mother is ill. The doctor gives her perhaps 2 months. She asks for you daily. Whatever has passed between us, she deserves to see her daughter before the end. I have enclosed funds for your travel. Your father, James Rourke." A bank draft fell from the envelope, enough for stage fare to Kansas and back, with extra besides. Clara read it twice, then set it down carefully. "My mother is dying." Bo reached across the table, took her hand. "I'm sorry. I should hate her. She would have sold me to Thomas as surely as my father. But—" Clara's voice broke. "She's still my mother." "You need to go." "Do I after everything?" She stood, pacing to the window. "What if it's a trap? What if Thomas—" "Is your mother the type to lie about dying?" Clara considered. No, she'd consider it undignified. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass. "If I go back, even for a moment, I'm afraid I'll lose everything I've become, that I'll turn back into that frightened girl in the wedding dress." Bo joined her at the window, not touching, but close. "You're not that girl anymore. A year of ranch life changes a person. You've faced down blizzards and Thomas Whitmore himself. Kansas can't take that from you. Come with me. If you want, though it might complicate things with your family." Clara turned to face him. "Let it. I won't pretend to be unmarried and available. Won't give them false hope of reclaiming their lost daughter." They made plans that evening. The ranch could manage a week without them, their nearest neighbor. Old Sam Martinez would check the stock. Clara wrote to her father, stating she would come but not alone. Let him make of that what he would. 3 days later, they boarded the eastbound stage. Clara wore her best dress, simple but well-made, nothing like the finery she'd once owned. Bo sat beside her, solid and reassuring, dressed in his town clothes but still unmistakably a rancher. The journey took 4 days, with each mile east. Clara felt the past pulling at her. By the time they reached Kansas, her shoulders were rigid with tension. Topeka hadn't changed. The same wide streets, same brick buildings, same sense of propriety masking ambition. Clara's family home sat on Elm Street, a Greek revival mansion that now seemed absurdly grand after the simple ranch house. "Imposing," Bo observed. "Imprisoning," Clara corrected. Her father answered the door himself, thinner than she remembered, gray threading his hair. His eyes widened at the sight of her, then narrowed as he took in Bo. "Clara Jane." No warmth in the greeting. "And this is—" "Bo Holt," Clara said firmly. "My partner." James Rourke's lips thinned, but he stepped aside. "Your mother is upstairs." The house smelled of illness and lavender water. Clara climbed the familiar stairs, Bo behind her, past portraits of stern ancestors who seemed to judge her rough hands and sun-touched skin. Her mother lay propped against pillows in the master bedroom, shockingly fragile. The robust woman who'd orchestrated social campaigns and terrorized servants had shrunk to bird bones and tissue paper skin. "Clara," her voice was a whisper. "Oh, my dear girl." Clara approached the bed slowly. "Hello, Mother." "You look—" Her mother's eyes traveled over Clara's simple dress, her work-worn hands. "Different." "I am different." "The scandal. Clara, You can't imagine. The Whitmore engagement broken. You disappeared. We told everyone you'd gone to Switzerland for your health, but people talk. Let them. Clara sat on the bedside chair. I'm not here to discuss society gossip. Her mother's gaze shifted to Beau in the doorway. And this gentleman, someone who treats me as a person, not property. Clara kept her voice level. Someone who values what I think and feel. I see. Her mother closed her eyes. Your father hoped, if you came back, Thomas would still... I will never marry Thomas Whitmore. I've made a life elsewhere. A good life. As a servant. The words held old poison despite her weakness. As a rancher, I work my own land, make my own choices. I'm happy, mother, actually happy. Her mother was quiet so long, Clara thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, I used to paint, before I married, watercolors. Your father said it wasn't appropriate for his wife to have hobbies. Clara blinked, surprised. I never knew. There's much you never knew, much I never told you. Her mother's hand, light as leaves, touched Clara's. I thought I was protecting you, teaching you to survive in the world as it is. You were teaching me to surrender. Yes, the admission came soft as breath. Because I surrendered. Gave up my paints, my opinions, myself, became what was expected. A tear slipped down her papery cheek. I didn't want that for you, but I didn't know how to teach you differently. How to be strong when I never was. Clara squeezed the fragile hand gently. I learned anyway. They talked through the afternoon carefully, with old wounds still tender. But honestly, her mother asked about the ranch, about her work, even about Beau. Not with approval, perhaps, but with genuine curiosity. As evening approached, her mother tired. Will you stay a few days at least? Yes, but not here. Clara glanced at Beau. We'll take rooms at the hotel. Your father won't like that. I know. Her mother smiled then, a ghost of her old spirit. Good. He needs to not like things more often. She beckoned Clara closer. That man of yours, he loves you. Yes, you love him. Completely. Then you're wealthier than I ever was. Her mother patted her cheek. Don't surrender it. Clara Jane, not for propriety, not for family, not for anything. Clara stayed 3 days. Each afternoon she sat with her mother, sometimes talking, often just present. Beau explored Topeka, returning with stories that made her mother laugh, a sound Clara hadn't heard in years. Her father remained coldly civil, making one attempt to discuss her return to proper society before Beau's steady gaze shut him down. Thomas Whitmore, they learned, had married a banker's daughter from St. Louis. Clara felt only relief. On the last morning, her mother rallied enough to sit up properly. I have something for you. She directed Clara to the wardrobe, to a hidden drawer. Inside lay a wooden box. My paints, her mother said as Clara opened it. Dried watercolors, brushes carefully wrapped. I kept them. Foolish, but I couldn't throw them away. They're beautiful. Take them. Use them. Her mother's eyes were fierce despite her weakness. Paint your mountains, your horses, your life. Create something that's yours. Clara kissed her mother's forehead. I will. They left that afternoon. At the stage station. Clara turned for one last look at the town that had shaped and nearly broken her. Then she climbed aboard, settling beside Beau with deep relief. You all right? He asked as Topeka disappeared behind them. Yes, sad, but all right. She leaned into his warmth. Ready to go home. The journey west felt like shedding skins, each mile stripping away the last traces of Clara Jane Rourke, properly raised Kansas daughter. By the time they reached Wyoming, she was simply Clara again, eager for the sight of their valley. Spring had progressed in their absence. The garden needed weeding, the chickens scolded their neglect, but everything was whole and waiting. That evening, Clara unpacked her mother's watercolors at the kitchen table. Never painted before, she admitted. Learn. Bo suggested. Plenty of beautiful things to practice on. She started with the view from the window, the barn, the mountains beyond. Her first attempts were disasters, water bleeding everywhere, colors muddy. But she persisted, finding peace in the concentration required. A month later, word came that her mother had passed peacefully. Clara grieved, but without regret. They'd said what needed saying, bridged what could be bridged. She painted that day the spring flowers her mother would never see, the life she'd never quite managed to claim for herself. When it dried, Clara framed it carefully. Not skilled work, but honest. "It's good," Bo said, studying the painting. "It's mine," Clara corrected. "That's what matters." Summer arrived in full glory. The ranch prospered. Their partnership deepened. And Clara's painting slowly improved. Sometimes, working in the garden or mending harnesses, she thought of her mother's surrendered dreams. Clara had surrendered nothing. She'd claimed everything: love, work, art, freedom. All of it earned through choice and courage. None of it given easily. One evening, as they sat watching sunset paint the mountains gold, Bo cleared his throat. "Been thinking, dangerous habit." He smiled, but his eyes were serious. "That fiction we maintain for the town, the separate residences, gets tiresome." "What are you saying?" He shifted to face her fully. "I'm saying we've been partners in everything but name for over a year. I'm saying I love you, not as some possession or convenience, but as the woman who chose to build something real with me." He pulled out a simple silver ring. "I'm saying marry me, Clara, not for the town, not for propriety, for us." Clara looked at the ring, plain silver, no stones, inscribed inside with tiny words she couldn't quite read. "What does it say?" "Not a bride, a choice." He met her eyes. "Because that's what you'd be. Choosing this life, this partnership, free and clear." She thought of her mother's watercolors, hidden for 40 years, of Thomas's expensive diamond meant to mark ownership, of the wedding dress burning in the stove. All those expectations turned to ash. Then she looked at Bo, patient, steady, offering not a cage but a partnership. The man who'd seen her at her lowest and helped her find her strength, who'd risked everything to protect her freedom to choose. "Yes," she said simply. "My choice is yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, where it sat warm and right. They were married a week later in the garden, Reverend Miller officiating, Sarah as witness, old Sam Martinez playing his guitar. Clara wore a simple blue dress she'd made herself, wildflowers in her hair instead of orange blossoms. That night, she didn't sleep alone, but then she hadn't for months. The only difference was the matched rings catching moonlight, and the knowledge that this time, she'd chosen every part of her story. No more running, no more hiding. Just two people who'd found each other across loss and distance, building something genuine and good. The ranch, witness to grief and healing both, sheltered them as it always had. And Clara Jane Rourke, rancher, painter, partner, wife by choice, not compulsion, was finally completely home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you're enjoying these tales of the Old West. Please share your location in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about Clara and Bo's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit the hype button to help more people discover these heartfelt frontier tales.